We are part of perinatal center here, level 3 unit. In German it's a level 1 unit, but international classification level 3 unit. So we have about 35 beds for intensive care and intermediate care. We have about 70 babies below 1500 grams per year. Overall we have around 700 admissions per year. The catchment area is around 7,500 births here in the region of Franconia. About 10 years or 12 years before implementing it here, we started to become more interested in nutrition and growth in babies, preterm babies, and that was already in the University of Greifswald, which was, by the way, the most southern university of Sweden for quite a while. We started to do some improvement in nutrition and realized that it affects growth. While I was at McMaster, we indeed developed the principle of target fortification because we realized how variable the micronutrient content of human milk, of mother's own milk is. And it's not only that breast milk is sometimes low in one ingredient or high in the other. The composition of all three ingredients, so the carbohydrates, protein and fat, are all over the place. It's a completely unstandardized kind of diet. And when we realized it and did some of these XY plots for the different nutrients and saw this wide scattering, we understood why some babies cannot grow despite you try to increase feeds and put a little bit of this and that in, because it's so highly variable and you cannot see it by looking at the sample what is missing or what is too much. That's why then we had the idea to measure the breast milk content and then add the deficient macronutrients. Our experience with this was so great that after coming back to Germany and taking over the lead of the hospital here and also of the NICU, we implemented target fortification as a standard routine procedure here in the unit.
Every preterm infant has individual needs of nutrients. It is dependent on the gestational age, it is dependent on growth. And the best nutrition, that is what we think, is breast milk. There's a huge variation in macronutrients, which means carbohydrates can be low or high, protein can be low or high, fat can be low or high. And it is not just a diluting effect. There can be a milk with low carbohydrates but high protein, or high fat and low protein. So it would be really necessary to know what we provide to babies. We would never give a drug or a formula without knowing the information on the nutritional fact sheet or the doses of antibiotics or steroids or other drugs. We always need to know the precise amount what we're giving. And the same is with breast milk.
So coming back here to Germany, it was first about giving teaching, education, giving the background, pointing out that there are babies that do not grow, and then basically getting people on board. That is very important, to have the buy-in of the whole staff. It's the doctors, because they prescribe also nutrition. They have to judge whether babies grow well or not. But we also need the buy-in from the nurses, because they feed babies at the bedside. They prepare the food, and some units prepared at the bedside, others prepared in their own milk kitchen. So we had to bring all these people on board, which we did. And then it was surprisingly painless, I must say, to implement it, because when we started to get the first results and we saw the unbalanced composition of human milk, sometimes very low protein, sometimes very low fat, with enough protein, our attending said, "My goodness, we cannot feed this." So it becomes obvious when you see the data. And that was one of the biggest motivations, I think, to do that. And after that, when we gained experience, now it's a smoothly running routine process that I believe nobody would question.
At the first step, it looks like that you need more stuff to do targeted fortification, because the milk needs to be collected, then measured, calculated and prepared for feeding. However, after our colleagues have seen the results of breast milk analysis, they were impressed how much breast milk is varying in its composition, and then they also have seen that babies grew better, and the result was that doctors requested the milk analysis, and they were curious to see the results in order to prepare the prescription for the following days.
My initial thoughts when we started implementing target fortification in NICU was that it would be a lot more complicated than it turned out to be, a lot more complex. There seemed to be a lot of steps involved that called for a lot of additional work that we were not sure we would be able to accommodate. It is extremely easy. It falls easily within the daily routines that we have, and the additional time that it requires is at a minimum. So we have sterile bottles available in the unit that the moms can grab after each visit and bring home with them so that they can continue pumping on a regular basis. At home, we ask them to freeze the milk that they've pumped and to bring it back to us in a cooler with the following visit. Each bottle is marked with the name of the child as well as the time and date when the milk was extracted. We then put the bottles into the freezer in the unit, and they are stored there until we need them for actual feeding. When the milk is required, then the required volume of milk is removed for each child from the freezer and placed into a refrigerator the afternoon before it's required so that it can thaw overnight and can be used the following day to mix according to the individualized recipe for each patient. When we're sampling, then we do our best to combine all the milk that is being used from the mom on that day so that we get a nicely mixed, nicely combined mixture of the day's milk. And then we take a 5 milliliter sample size of that into a little container that is then analyzed. Each mom's milk contains different amounts of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And based on how the child is growing and based on the analysis for each sample, if the mom is lacking in any of these macronutrients, then appropriate adjustments are made in the recipe to ensure that the child is getting the required amount of nutrition that best optimizes their growth while in the unit. Once the doctors have prepared the individualized recipe for each child, the recipe then goes up into the milk kitchen, where the instructions for the preparation are followed. So we prepare our bottles or the milk for a 24-hour feeding window. So depending on whether the child gets 6, 8, 12 feedings a day, we prepare the appropriate number of bottles, which is then stored in the refrigerator in the unit in close proximity to the patients. And the mixture remains there until it is needed for feeding, at which point it's put into a bottle warmer before it's fed to the patient.
The most important and most striking thing is that these babies grow like on train tracks. So many of our tiny babies down to 500 grams, when they are being born, they drop for 3-4 days, nearly like in a 90-degree angle, their weight, and then there's a 90-degree angle back, and then they grow with a 0.6, 0.7 Z-score below their birth percentile until term. We rarely have babies that do zigzag or fall off their percentiles. There might be babies with short gut, but then they have a reason because you have limited resorption capacity, or maybe babies who have more needs, like BPD babies. But the average preterm baby down to 23 weeks that had a good transition, that had was on enteral feeds early, they don't experience any kind of step functions or postnatal growth retardation. That is the one finding. The other one, what we see is that metabolically they are more stable. Blood sugar and electrolytes are rarely out of order. Urea is usually low because we give a balanced diet of protein to energy. The other thing what we see is that babies become more or earlier stable, clinically stable in terms of thermal control, in terms of autonomy, because they grew better, we believe, and we can say that with a good number of babies, we are about 2 weeks shorter in the length of stay than the average of the German DRGs, which is a very robust system.
From our RCT, in which over 100 babies were included, we found that the neurodevelopmental outcome showed a trend for improved neurodevelopment with 2 years of age. We did a Bailey analysis in those infants, and we have seen that targeted fortification improves the outcome. And the results with our cohort were not significant. However, we know that in statistics we are not considering any more this p-value less than 0.05 when we see huge improvement, and we think an improvement of 10 Bailey scores, it's great.
Maybe I can also add that we believe that because most of these babies do not experience growth issues, parents feel much more comfortable with the health of the child. Instead of, if you see, oh, the baby is not growing well, maybe we should do this and this, so we are a little bit concerned. We are rarely concerned about growth. And we do also body composition measurements, so we can show that indeed these babies are not super fat. So they gain their weight by gaining lean mass. We have not done a formal cost analysis, but if I put that together, it is definitely not more expensive than doing blood gas analysis, I think. The device, okay, it costs some money. If you break it down over 10 years, then it's a few $1,000s per year. If you break it down per baby, it's a few dollars. Infrastructure costs. Maintenance is close to zero. Yes, we have quality control. Every now and then there is a service that needs to be done, but that is not exorbitant high. And then we have the time for the measurements, which is a few minutes per measurement per child. So it's in the order of really of blood gas analysis. If we hold against it that we might have indeed a shorter length of stay, even if that is only by a week. A day costs between 400 and 600 in continuous care, costs about 400 to 600 euros times 7. Then we are at 2,800 to 3,000 something euros. I think no baby has such high costs for target fortification, for the milk analysis.
There's a lot of care that goes into how the children are fed, and I think it really brings quality to the care that we provide, that we break down the data to this level. Like I said, there can be big differences between samples from various moms in what their milk contains, and having this information enables us to really optimize the growth for each child. And especially when there are problems and the children are not growing the way that we would want them to, then this is definitely a good tool to have to rule out certain possibilities that otherwise we would not become aware of. And you know, honestly, it's a sense of pride. So I often say that parents maybe are not fully aware, or they don't know how lucky they are that the children are in this unit, and they're not aware of the care and the attention and the level of detail that goes into making sure that until discharge, these kids are getting the absolute best care that they can. And this level of granularity that goes into it is a source of pride, at least for me.